Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, Peter, it's been an eventful weekend in Cuba. There have been extensive demonstrations in Havana, something we don't normally associate with Cuba. And while they started with issues of food and medicine, and then the unavailability of vaccines, it quickly spiraled into attacks on the government and so on. Needless to say, the US government has already got itself involved. We've had tweets from State Department officials expressing their solidarity with the protesters. We've had tweets from Jake Sullivan, the Biden administration's national security advisor, expressing his solidarity. Worse, we've had all of the familiar gas bags in Congress, including, of course, Marco Rubio, all expressing their solidarity, you know, that it's time to overthrow the Cuban dictatorship and so on. Rubio has gone a little bit further because Rubio has asked the Biden administration to demand that the Cuban military stop obeying orders from the government and join the people. And so the familiar refrain now from the Biden administration is that, well, we want calm and we're against the use of violence against peaceful protesters. So they're automatically deemed peaceful protesters, even though, as we've seen from the scenes, they don't look that peaceful. So at this stage, this seems fairly early days. We don't know what will happen. Maybe it'll fizzle out. Maybe it'll get more intense. But some kind of a regime change operation is underway. I think it's no coincidence that there's a Biden administration in power. These things always take place when the Democrats are around. Remember the days of the Obama administration, and you know, it was always inevitable that once the Castros departed from the scene, there would be some major U.S. attempt to return to the status quo ante, which the United States has been dreaming of ever since Fidel entered Havana. So we'll see what happens, but I think this bears watching and could be a very serious situation. All right, Peter.
You know, of all the stories, George, of all the stories in my lifetime when it comes to geopolitics, the one that I trust the U.S. government the least with is Cuba. Okay, because you know, when we agreed that we would discuss this, I didn't read any American media at all. I read the BBC, you know, trying to get a little bit of distance from it, because Cuba is just such part and parcel of the fabric of our politics. Okay, we can go back to the Bay of Pigs, you know, the Church Commission, how many different ways they tried to poison Fidel, you know, all of these shenanigans here, and so when people are frustrated, they protest. I don't have a problem with that. But we do know that for the entire history of the Cuban Revolution, the US has been trying to subvert it and overthrow it. So I'm looking at all of this with a huge grain of salt, okay? Because we know that this is it's a point of, it's almost pathological. Cuba is just a pathological issue. I mean, the only thing that's really close to it is Iran. Okay, they're just pathologies there. So, well, I also have no belief that the U.S. wants to help.
No,
okay. No. At all. I mean, so everyone watching this, just forget the rhetoric. Okay, and Marco Rubio. Oh my God. Okay, I mean, you know, little Marco's back on the scene again, okay, causing trouble. Right. And what he's doing is that you know, he's just looking after his electoral ambitions, okay? So he's talking to the Cubans in Miami and Dade County, okay? I'm sorry, maybe he has some real interest in Cuba. I seriously doubt it. These people are all hypocrites. But you said that I wouldn't say there is a possibility of a forced regime change in play, because they won't. What they want to do is, it's called entryism. There could be legitimate grievances. Definitely, I don't discount that. Okay. And then you start taking advantage of it. And who do they have? What kind of fifth column they have there, which of course I truly believe is there. And what they want to do is traditionally they want to pick and choose winners. Yates is the guy,
right. Well, I think
and Guaido is the guy.
Yeah, but the key here is clearly going to be the issue of violence, and that's why they're already talking about this violence. In other words, we have the story, we have the peaceful protesters, and then we have the government that is using violence against the peaceful protesters. So that's the narrative. And so therefore, once you can have any scenes of violence, you can always blame the government for it, and then start, the usual kind of whipping up fervor, and, and again, trying to encourage in every way possible to intensify the protests, and thereby
another Maidan. You're looking at a possible
right.
Maidan
Exactly. That's
scenario.
always been that. That's a classic U.S. policy for regime change, which is to try to provoke violence and then blame the government for the violence. So, we clearly see the parameters of this new U.S. involvement. Clearly, the Cuban government is taking it very seriously. I mean, they've addressed, they said social media, they talked about YouTube is behind it. And it's also noticeable that the Russian government is taking it very seriously. I mean, they've already, today, the foreign ministry issued a statement, said that we are watching the situation very closely. We're not going to tolerate any outside interference. So I think there's clearly, within the next few days, there's going to be a major regime change attempt launched from Washington. We have to see how it develops.
Maybe an additional caveat is the Cuban government, the Cuban Revolution has withstood American empire for 6 decades now. I wouldn't give up on them real quick. Okay.
No, I wouldn't either.
And of course, I think that they do have taken a look at Maidan very, very carefully and probably adjusted their policies accordingly. But never underestimate the vengefulness from the empire. Okay.
Right.
And because, again, I saw, the Biden administration is, no violence and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, they are by definition violence. Okay. That's what they peddle best and most often is violence.
That's it. And that's it. And that's why you always play this game, which is you have the peaceful protesters like Libya. Oh, Libya, it's all Gaddafi. Gaddafi is using violence. No one else is using violence. Gaddafi is, Assad is waging war against his own people. And then, of course, before that, which was the template for all the interventions was in Yugoslavia. Oh, well, the only violence is coming from the Yugoslav National Army. Oh, only coming from the Serbian government. So you always have that narrative, and the US is playing this exactly. They've been doing it. Now, I do think it is very significant. It always happens with the Democrat administrations. They launch these campaigns, these regime change operations. And this is what happens. But you're right when you say I wouldn't give up on Cuban people. I also think the odds of success are not great. At least I would have thought. Who knows? But remember, even against Venezuela, the whole Guaido adventure fizzled into irrelevance. Even that they couldn't pull off. I would have thought it's going to be a lot tougher to do anything in Cuba.
Yeah, but they're certainly going to try, George, because it's just in their genetic code. I mean, it's such a humiliation because it was a client regime before, and it was very, very. I mean, why do you think the revolution happened in the first place? Okay, and I wouldn't be surprised, George. I think there are probably still property rights issues that that have gone through families and descendants. We'll return to Havana.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great.
And on top of it, I mean, I have never personally been to Cuba, but I know a lot of people have. Because Cuba never really industrialized in kind of a full throttled modern sense, it's a pretty clean, pristine place. It's a bit run down. I mean, you always see these stories about the 1950s cars and stuff like that, which kind of look cool. But if there were to be a forced regime change, boy, I'll tell you, they'll have planes in Miami ready to take off to gobble that place up. Because
Yes.
people have to understand, when you think, if you take Cuba, everybody thinks of it, that way. But if you stand it up, I mean, that's a good part of the eastern seaboard. It's a pretty big place, pretty long place, okay? And that would be prime real estate, prime real estate.
Absolutely. I mean, the people in Florida that are absolutely salivating about the amount of money that they're going to make there. So yeah, absolutely, they're really, really anxious to get their hands on Cuba. But if ever there was anything that was bipartisan, it is the attitude towards Cuba. So it's kind of interesting also that the Trump administration kind of reversed some of the overtures of the Obama administration, but Biden hasn't reversed Trump's policies on that. So everything that Trump did has remained in place. And all the key Senate Democrats have also been banging the drum about these protests. The guy, the New Jersey guy, the crooked New Jersey guy.
Menendez.
Yeah. Menendez, exactly. Yeah, he's already on board for I'm with the Cuban people. So we're all going to be hearing we're with the Cuban people.
George, how could those people? How could they have free healthcare, free education? Okay. A thriving medical sector under the conditions of embargo for 60 years, okay? And how dare this country have virtually no racism? We have to have racism there. That's how we control people. How dare they? It must go.
That's it, yeah. I mean, I think it's also interesting. I mean, you raised the issue of the fifth column. We'll see. We'll see how extensive the fifth column is. I mean, obviously, the Americans aren't going to try any path of invasion. I mean, they tried it once. That ended in an absolute disaster. They're not going to do it again. But they are relying on the fifth column, and we'll see how powerful it is. I am sure that the fifth column has already been out and about in these protests, much like you see this that fifth column in Moscow and in Minsk. I mean, it's a familiar cast of characters, and the Americans have been pouring a lot of money into these democracy movements in Cuba over the years. So there's probably a lot of money splashing around, but we'll just see how extensive this really is.
Yep, we take it very seriously. We're going to be watching it because there's a lot. This is really one of the longest feuds that the U.S. has had around the world. This pesky little island seems to be able to hold out on its own. It's only 90 miles away. We had to go all the way around the world to screw up in Iraq.
Right, exactly. But it's kind of interesting because, of course, in both the case of Cuba and the case of Iran, the United States lost a prime piece of real estate. Yeah. So they had that government, it was all in its pocket. They didn't really realize just how unpopular the American presence in Cuba was. I mean, Cuba is just not an American place. I mean, it was, run by the Spanish. There's a very different culture. They never took to American dominance, but the Americans didn't realize it. Same happened with, in Iran under the Shah, the Pahlavis. They didn't understand just how much the sort of U.S. presence was absolutely loathed throughout Iranian society.
Well, they were Democrats. Were Democrats, even after the Civil War. I think even particularly, but before and after the Civil War, they wanted to annex Cuba. Okay, and but one of the reasons why they backed up is that there are too many Hispanic people there. Oh my goodness, we could just get rid of those people. It'd be a great place. Okay, this is the Democratic Party talking, folks. Okay, the Democratic Party. No, there are just too many brown people there. No.
Right.
So
Right.
instead, we'll just have hotels and corruption and prostitution and drugs and sex trade, all of that. You know, there was their plan B, and they did it really, really well. Okay.
Yeah, for a while, but they until they really, the Cubans really had enough, and that was it.
Which Godfather is it? Is it
It was
which
Godfather 2.
two?
Godfather 2, yeah.
Awesome,
It
awesome.
was very well done. I have to say that whole, remember the famous scene where basically the
So if you don't want to listen to George and I, just watch Godfather 2 and you got the gist.
you got exactly, but you see how the whole everything just simply collapsed. That everything that the Americans had created just tottered and fell overnight, and they just had to scarper. You know, the people like Michael Corleone who were making a ton of money in Cuba.
Yeah, but he was smart. It's like, it's time to go.
Right, exactly.
It was great because in the film, he doesn't really panic. He doesn't cry. He doesn't have a mental breakdown. It's like, oh, the jig's up.
Time to go. Yep.
All righty, everybody. We're on Locals right now. It's a really great community. It's thegaggle.locals.com. George and I are doing a series of Zoom interviews with individual gagglers, which has really turned into a fun endeavor for, I think, all involved. We have a tip jar that we wish you would frequent often, and we're hopefully, knock on wood, this week the Gaggle store will be in operation. Lots of good, cool stuff there.
Yes, exactly. Really nice stuff. You know, mugs, t-shirts, sweatshirts. You know, excellent stuff. You know, you'll love it. Any assistance you can offer will be most appreciated. The more help you can provide us, the better the product will be. We are also on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.